Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. Welcome to the briefing room. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Great to have you with us today. A lot of news
who had worked with his office to either say sorry or just to send them a message in general.
Yeah, he did, Tom, say he thought that Jeffrey Epstein deserved a stiffer sentence that he got, but he defended that deal, as you say. He said it's basically the best deal he could get at the time. He said there was sufficient evidence to go to trial, but not sufficient evidence to be confident in the outcome. Do you think that's reasonable? You know the details of the case. Do you think that's a reasonable explanation of what was the case 10 years ago?
Listen, the phrase he used was the gulf. There was a gulf between going to trial and actually getting a conviction. Those are the words that he used. From the evidence that we have seen, we're talking about dozens of victims. Teenage girls who said they were in high school, they were recruited and they recruited other girls to go there and then had Jeffrey Epstein sexually assault them. Now, he claimed that at times some of these witnesses, which is understandable because these are young girls who allegedly had been sexually assaulted, did not want to testify. They were worried to talk. They were nervous. This is all understandable. But as one victim's attorney pointed out to me, even if you have two victims who will go on the record, you go after that case. You prosecute that case. And yet he chose not to. The other big issue here was, and a lot of people ask this question, why did you let him agree to pleading guilty to prostitution? That essentially labels these high school girls as prostitutes. He could have done another charge like lewd and lascivious molestation, which if you look at the statute in Florida, that's exactly what happened in this case. That's what the allegations were if you look at the court documents. But for some reason, his office allowed Jeffrey Epstein to plead guilty to prostitution.
And he did say, Tom, he said he would submit to an interview by the Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility, sort of a part of this damage control mode from Acosta. But you're right, his action closed the FBI investigation, shut it down with all those young women out there still struggling to come forward. Tom Yamas, thanks for your reporting, your tough questioning in there. One last one to Jordan Phelps over at the White House. Jordan, there was so much scrutiny of Acosta. The president had his eyes on this case. Where do you think this goes from here now in terms of the administration's response? What will they be watching to see if he can stay on the job?
Devin, a big key is what comes out on the Hill. We've seen a lot of Democrats, a lot of Democratic presidential candidates come forward and say Acosta should resign, but we really haven't seen the ranks of the president's own party split from Acosta. So if the Republicans stay united behind the president here, assuming the president decides to stick by his man here, then it's hard to see Acosta departing from this administration anytime soon, Devin. So it really depends on whether those calls continue and get louder and that chorus of public opinion just gets too fierce for the administration to hold it off.
Yeah, and whether conservative Republicans join the chorus as well right now, mostly Democrats, as you said. Jordan Phelps, our White House reporter. Thanks so much, Jordan. Turning now to the crisis at the border. Today, new questions about the treatment of children in those detention centers in Texas and New Mexico. The House Oversight Committee a short time ago convening a hearing on the conditions inside those centers. You've seen the pictures. They have captivated the nation. The Department of Homeland Security Inspector General calling them overcrowded, unacceptable. New questions today. As the mother of a 19-month-old daughter who died in custody came forward a short time ago to tell her story and demand that Congress take action. Here she is.
Salió sin vida. Y eso a mí me parte el corazón. Y si hoy puedo hacer el cambio, si hoy puedo hacer la diferencia de contarles a todo el mundo.
She left the hospital without any life left in her, and it breaks my heart. It's very hard to be here and tell this story, but I'm standing here in front of all of you, telling it to cause a change and to make a difference after telling what happens in these detention centers and the cruelty that is inflicted upon these children. As a mother, it's very difficult to express what has happened. And I thank you very much for listening to what I have to say.
That was a translator speaking for Yasmin Juarez. Her daughter spent 3 weeks in an ICE detention facility, received some prescription drugs, but not sufficient medical care. They're now suing the federal government. Want to bring in our Hill reporter, Catherine Falders, who's there at the hearing. She was also at that event. Yasmin Juarez, the mother, is now testifying before the panel. Catherine, what are House Democrats hoping to accomplish with this hearing? And is there any legislation on the table right now?
Look, I think they're hoping to accomplish exactly what you heard that mother say right there, that she's speaking out. It's hard for her to do, but she wants to bring awareness to this problem. She wants change, Devin, and as you said, she's bringing this lawsuit. She's suing the U.S. government. Her 19-month-old daughter died from a viral lung infection in one of these facilities. So this is the beginning of a lot of hearings that we're going to see on this topic. She's obviously testifying behind me here today, but this week on Friday, too, we'll hear from the Inspector General, and Cummings also announced that the acting DHS Secretary Kevin McAleenan will show up here next week on July 18th.
All right, Catherine Faulders, thanks for that. Want to bring in Claudia Flores. She's a university professor at the University of Chicago, law professor, also the director of the International Human Rights Clinic there, someone who has worked and advised the United Nations on treatment of migrants. Claudia, great to see you again. The president has said in recent days that the conditions inside these facilities are better than those that many of these families and children are leaving behind. I guess the big question here is, what should the standard be? What's the international standard for what these children should experience in there? And, you know, we hear complaints about the food and maybe the temperature. Some of those things are quite subjective. Help us sort of get a baseline for what we should be judging all of this by.
Sure. Well, better conditions than in one's home country is definitely not the standard. There are two questions around the issue of detaining children. The first is what's the standard, and the second is who's holding these agencies accountable. So the standard is set by a court settlement that has been in place for 20 years, the Flores settlement, which is actually quite detailed about the kinds of conditions that we need to provide immigrant children in detention. That includes medical care, that includes food, that includes water, that includes cells that are not freezing cold. So that is quite clear. And there's also international standards, both under Convention on Civil and Political Rights, which requires that the U.S. Treat all immigrant detainees with dignity, and also the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which the U.S. has signed on to. These are not new questions. We just seem to be rehashing them in a very disturbing way.
Yeah, that's for sure. This is not something that had been raised for some time, even as these influxes of migrants continued through the Obama administration. Claudia, let's talk about the deaths, migrant child deaths, for a second, because they have disturbed so many people. You saw the gripping testimony of that mother, Yasmin Juarez, there. You know, the thought of so many of these kids being left helpless inside centers bothers a lot of Americans. Should the U.S. government be held legally accountable for all of those cases? As a lawyer, where do you draw the line there on what the U.S. should be responsible for?
Well, there are claims that allow the U.S. government to be held accountable and agents of the U.S. government when they're acting within the scope of their employment. There's also the possibility for damages claims against individual agents. Accountability is a huge issue here, and it's not new under the Trump administration. It just has gotten much worse under the Trump administration. The kinds of questions we need to be asking is, who is responsible for accountability? Who's responsible for discipline? Who's responsible for ensuring that agents in detention facilities actually meet these standards? Research that has been done in the past, including by this clinic, has found that accountability mechanisms are extremely weak within Customs and Border Protection and ICE more generally. And without real accountability mechanisms, we can't expect the U.S. government to actually meet standards. It's not an issue of funding. It's an issue of internal institutional overhaul. And it's great that the public is looking at it now, but this has been an issue even since the Obama administration. Children were reporting all sorts of abuses, being punched and kicked by Border Patrol agents, being held in freezing cells, being denied medical care or sanitary napkins. This was already happening since 2009 at least.
Yeah, and that's one reason why we've seen so many of these members of Congress making very high-profile trips to these facilities to try to juice up that accountability, if you will, and hold more hearings on the subject. The administration is taking some steps, though, to try to at least improve the care of these kids. Our Quinn Owen is down in Texas today in Carrizo Springs. He just visited a brand-new facility opened by the Department of Health and Human Services to take some of the pressure off that overcrowding with children. Quinn, I think you're joining us by phone, and we also have some new pictures coming into the facility from the Associated Press. Those cameras got inside. What did you see in there? Tell us about it.
Hi, Devin. Yes, I'm standing right now on the grounds of the Carrizo Springs facility. We were given pretty thorough access to this place. It was stood up just a few weeks ago to handle the massive influx of migrant kids that have been seen at the border. Everything we've seen here was clean and in order. The staff was prepared to see and meet with representatives of the media that came through today. There's bed space for the kids, dorms, outdoor play areas. I'm looking at a couple of soccer fields right now where kids are allowed to come out and play. We've got straight in front of me is a multi-purpose giant tent space where the kids eat and have church services on Sunday mornings. It is a small town for unaccompanied kids here, and that's where they're getting cared for after they go through Border Patrol custody.
Yeah, we should make clear to everybody this is the Health and Human Services Department. They are simply responsible for caring for the kids, doing the best they can after they've been processed. And we were seeing there, Quinn, the pictures on the screen as you were talking. It looks like a really nice facility, and it's not lost on anybody that there's a reason why the government is letting the cameras in now after weeks of denying the cameras. It looks quite nice. What were people saying when you were on scene there? I mean, is this sort of typical of the other facilities you've looked at?
Well, this facility is far under capacity, actually. It's built to accommodate as many as 1,300 kids. Right now, there's just over 200 staying here, and they're prepared to take many more if there's an incident at another location or if there's another surge of kids crossing the border. But what we're seeing here is a fully staffed, well-resourced facility. There are security measures all over. There's counseling facilities. We walked through a series of medical tents with plenty of room. Again, this particular facility is operating far under capacity, and it was stood up to address the surge. We heard earlier today and getting more details this week that the total number of migrants, including children, has declined in recent weeks. And that, of course, just comes off of a massive influx that we saw in May, earlier in June, and in April.
Yeah, let's put those numbers up for everybody. Just a reminder, news just in from the Customs and Border Protection that there were just over 100,000 apprehensions on the southern border in June. That's down 28%, significant decline. Some of that due to perhaps the warmer temperatures down at the southern border, but a good chunk of that also attributed to the efforts of Mexico cracking down on migrants flowing through their country to the U.S. Quinn Owen, terrific reporting. Thank you so much for that live report from the new children facility in Texas. Moving now on to the special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. The president, of course, just back from his state visit over meeting the Queen over there, to a rocky standoff with the UK ambassador here in Washington. Well, today, Kim Derrick resigned after years of being a close friend of the United States. He was forced out after those leaked messages of him disparaging President Trump. Let's bring Jordan Phelps back into this over at the White House. Jordan, we know that Theresa May was somewhat regretful of the departure of Derrick. What's been the reaction to officials at the White House? Just a few days ago, they were working with Derrick.
Yeah, Devin, interestingly, we haven't heard from President Trump on this. I've been told by White House officials if we hear a reaction to Derrick leaving, it would come from the president's Twitter handle. So far, it's silent on this topic, interestingly. But, Devin, it's hard to be the top diplomat to a country when that president is calling you wacky and a very stupid guy, as President Trump did in a set of tweets yesterday. The president had said after these leaked cables that he simply wasn't going to work with Derrick anymore. And so it really became sort of an untenable situation for him to remain in his post here, even though he really hadn't lost the backing of his own government. I think he made the diplomatic decision here in stepping aside.
Yep, Kim Derrick, a fixture in Washington no more. A new government coming soon in the UK, also likely a new ambassador. Jordan Phelps, thanks so much again for that reporting. Well, after President Trump, Democrats in the 2020 race for the White House and Congress are turning their attention to the top Republican in the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is their top target. They look to take out Mitch McConnell as somebody who is the chief obstacle to their agenda, and now he has a Democratic challenger. We're joined now by that challenger, Amy McGrath. She's a retired Marine lieutenant colonel, also a combat pilot. She is hot out of the gate to take on Mitch McConnell in 2020. She has raised $2.5 million in 24 hours. That's a new record. Amy, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. So what do you make of that donation flood? What does that say about your campaign?
Well, I think that it's not about me. It's about Kentucky, and it's about our country, and it's about Senator McConnell's failure in leadership of Kentucky and leadership in the country. I mean, I think people are really upset with the dysfunction in Washington, and this is no different around the country than it is here in Kentucky.
What do you think his biggest weakness is? As a he has deftly fended off challengers for years. As you look to take him on, what's his biggest weakness right now?
Well, I think he's weak in many areas. Kentucky voted overwhelmingly for President Trump, and many Kentuckians are still very positive about President Trump. And a lot of it is because if you think about why many Kentuckians voted for the president, they voted for him to drain the swamp, to do big things in infrastructure, to do reasonable things like bring down prescription drug prices and that sort of thing. And a lot of those things have been blocked by Senator McConnell. And so I think that's really the message. I mean, Kentuckians don't really like the political parties. They don't really think that the establishment, the D.C. establishment, has worked for Kentucky. And Senator McConnell is the biggest example of that.
And your opponents are already painting you as a scary candidate from the left. In fact, some of them have seized on some comments you made at a fundraiser recently. I wanted to ask you about them. You reportedly said that you were further left, more progressive than anyone else in the state of Kentucky. Do you stand by that? Is that an accurate characterization of your platform?
Well, it's really interesting. The Republicans like to play this 2-second clip, and they won't release the entirety of the clip, and this is standard in politics today. And I'll tell you, I remember about that fundraiser was that was right after the Las Vegas shootings, and I was up in Boston, and folks up there were wanting to put on what I thought was very restrictive laws with regards to guns. And I was trying to explain to them Kentucky. I'm a Kentuckian. I'm somebody who I've shot every weapon you can think of. I'm somebody who had a 9mm strapped to my chest in combat. And many Kentuckians were pro Second Amendment, and I am too. I'm a gun owner. And I was trying to say, look, I'm for reasonable things like better background checks, but you're not going to get much more than that out of Kentucky. So that's about as far as you go. And so I was explaining Kentucky back to the folks up there in Boston.
You're also married to a lifelong Republican. You're also somebody who's run before in the state. You ran a competitive race in 2018. What did you learn from your loss I guess about a year and a half ago? Well,
I think first of all, we defeated the Democratic Party establishment, and we exceeded expectations. And this is a different race, and so I look forward to presenting my case to the people of Kentucky. We came very close in the last cycle, and I'm going against a different person this time. This is a different race, and I look forward to this.
All right, Amy McGrath, we look forward to following your campaign. The Democratic candidate for Senate in the state of Kentucky, challenging Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader. Amy, thank you so much for joining us. For a little more now on this race, I want to bring in Philip Bailey. He's a political reporter for the Louisville Courier-Journal. Philip, thanks so much for coming on. What do you think the defining issue in this race will be?
President Trump. I mean, President Trump won Kentucky by 30 points over Hillary Clinton. And what you heard from Amy McGrath, Lieutenant Colonel, former Marine fighter pilot, is essentially she has to find a way to separate President Trump from Senator McConnell. Polling numbers show that President Trump's approval rating is about plus 16 here in Kentucky, but Senator McConnell's is about negative 16%. So overall net, approval rating. So there's a 32-point gap there. What Amy McGrath is trying to do is those folks, particularly out in more rural parts of the state, is say to them, I know you're a registered Democrat. I know you probably voted for President Trump, but you probably don't like Senator McConnell all that much. Are you willing to give me a chance? It's a high task, a difficult task, certainly a hard bet, but it's one she's certainly willing to make.
So you're saying she's actually going to have to win a whole bunch of people in Kentucky who would vote for Trump and vote for a Democrat for Senate, which is a tall order if you look at the numbers. Are you surprised by the financial support she's received right out of the gate here?
Oh, no. I mean, one thing Amy McGrath proved in her race for the House last year, she outraised incumbent Congressman Andy Barr by about $3 million, running against Mitch McConnell, who relishes in being the, quote, grim reaper of liberal America. Will have people from all across the country and even within the state who are willing to give her money. Money isn't going to be her issue. She's going to be able to compete with McConnell, I believe, for 18 months in this race. The hard math, though, is still at the ground level. How can Amy McGrath get people in 2020, in a year where the president will be on the ballot? There's not any Democrat of the 20 so who have announced that they're running for president who comes even close to beating Donald Trump. I believe Joe Biden gets to about maybe 8% here in Kentucky, close to President Trump. So what Amy McGrath has to walk this tightrope of saying, look, you voted for President Trump to drain the swamp. Well, the biggest alligator in that swamp is Mitch McConnell. The benefit for Senator McConnell, though, is that he can point to, and he's made this argument both here in Kentucky and across the country, is not just do I represent Kentucky, I represent middle America. Look at the top 4 leaders in Congress. They all, the Speaker of the House represents California. The minority leader in the Senate represents New York. The minority leader in the House represents California. He might be a Republican, Kevin McCarthy, but he still represents California.
It's totally.
The point is, I represent middle America. And look what I did with the Supreme Court. Look what I've done with the judiciary. So I think he has a very compelling argument himself. McGrath over these next 18 months is going to try to separate him.
It's going to be an epic clash, Philip, with a lot of money in that race and a lot of attention. As you said, the top issue in Kentucky will be President Trump himself as they duke it out. And we have a long way to go, but interesting to meet Amy McGrath. Philip Bailey, nice to meet you and have you join us today. Thanks so much.
No problem.
Turning now to the head of the nation's central bank, the Federal Reserve, making a little bit of news this afternoon in his testimony on Capitol Hill, hinting he could be about to cut interest rates that could send markets climbing. They were already up today. It's also a sign that perhaps the economy isn't as strong as it once was thought to be. Jay Powell, you see him there on the Hill, also made a little bit of news about his relationship with President Trump. Here's how he answered that question.
Mr. Chairman, if you got a call from the president today or tomorrow, and he said, I'm firing you, pack up, it's time to go, what would you do?
Well, of course I would not do that.
I can't hear you.
My answer would be no.
And you would not pack up and you would not leave?
No, ma'am.
Because you think the president doesn't have the authority? Is that why you would not leave?
I've kind of said what I've intended to say on the subject, and what I've said is that the law clearly gives me a 4-year term, and I fully intend to serve it.
Matt Vann covers the Fed for us. He's here now. Matt, Powell made pretty clear there he's not going anywhere. Why is that such a big deal?
Well, Devin, this is just a continuation in a long public feud between the president and his own pick for the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. The president has long signaled his displeasure with Chairman Powell. He told our own George Stephanopoulos last month that he's running out of patience with the chairman. Today, we saw several committee Democrats and even Republicans say that they would come to his support if the president were to try to oust him.
So that's a big deal. Stability for the markets, stability at the Fed. He's not going anywhere. Big deal to watch, Matt Vann. Thanks for your reporting. Much more on abcnews.com. Thanks for joining us today here on ABC News Live. We're here every day, 3:30 Eastern Time in the briefing room. Hope you'll join us tomorrow at this time on ABC News Live. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. See you then.